I'm Ginger with Motive 3, the CEO of Motive 3, and I'm sitting here with Larry Hernandez, who runs RecruiterDNA. And we've just been having kind of a fascinating conversation, a wide-ranging, fascinating conversation about recruiting, about storytelling, about culture, everything else. I first want to let Larry, you've worked at some of the biggest logos on the planet, so maybe you can just give us a little bit of a rundown of
Yeah,
who you've worked for and what you do.
sure. Thanks, Ginger. Yeah, fell into recruiting and have been lucky enough to work for a lot of companies that are strong customer advocates and have very strong cultures. So USAA for one, and then Zappos, which is an amazing um, place to work and has a very strong customer focus, and then Rackspace. Three of those companies, if you ask them what makes them different, they're going to say, customer driven, customer is number one, and they do it in different ways, which is fascinating. And then I focus on tech and also diversity recruiting. So I've worked for Microsoft, most recently Twitter. I got let go right when Elon Musk came in. I got to be on one call with him, which is a fascinating story. And right now RecruiterDNA is my own firm. I do consulting work, and I've just been obsessed with ChatGPT and all the things that it can do for me. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
Right on. Okay, well, I'm excited to have this conversation. I'm kind of wondering if we have to start with the Elon Musk story,
Well,
just
yeah, and
for
so it was so weird. So I've been wanting to work for Twitter for so long, right? And I get hired full time, and the pay is nice because they're not profitable, so they really spend a lot of money on us. I mean, they give us money for chairs, monitors. Just here's money, spend it. Okay, great. And I'm getting my groove, and all of a sudden there's these talks. First of all, the day I start, the founder leaves, right? So now we have a new CEO. I'm like, kind of a bummer, but whatever. It's Twitter. And then the Elon Musk rumors start happening, and Twitter has never really been through this, so they don't know what to tell us, what not to tell us. And so, really, myself, I'm getting news off of Wall Street Journal and Business Insider, and then relaying that to my team. You know, um, and so we didn't know what was being monitored on Slack, and all of our confidential video calls are being leaked. So now they don't know what to share with us. Meanwhile, there are reporters making dates on Match.com with Twitter employees, mic'd up, video camera, getting us to talk bad about Elon. And then it's live. And they're like, we got you. I mean, it was horrible. So we're having all these death threats. So they told us, hey, don't put your real location on Twitter or on LinkedIn. Just anyway. So the one call where the company was on, where Elon was going to tell us why Twitter. The deal had not been done yet, but they had already caught him. Twitter had already caught him. You said you're going to buy us at this rate. You have to, right? So he lost the lawsuit. And so there we are. He gets the call, and he's like walking in his kitchen, walking past the video, and he has this assistant like, you're on live in front of the company. Now, I don't even think he knew what call he was on. So it's in his kitchen, and he's like, yeah. Mm-hmm. And they're like, welcome. First question we have, why Twitter? And his questions were like, well, it's social media, and that's a big deal. It's important. The third question, and you can tell the line of questioning, like, why Twitter? And, he starts talking about the presence of aliens in our intergalactic presence of aliens. And we're just like, what is happening? Because we're not there. That's why I don't know if he knew what call he was on. So it was just kind of hard to keep a lot of the cameras went off, because I bet you people were smirking, and Slack was going crazy, like, making jokes about intergalactic. But that was the thing. First call, he didn't have anything of substance to really say. You could tell he did not. This is my opinion, of course, and I'm new with the company. You knew he didn't know what he was getting into. Freedom of press, freedom of speech. We knew, because I recruit for these teams, that there's so much horrible things on Twitter, sex trafficking, drug trafficking, that there needs to be surveillance and censorship. He wasn't there yet. So he didn't know what he was buying. He did not know the mess he was getting into. But the fascinating thing is that we're talking about aliens on the third question. So that's the Elon Musk story.
I love it, man. That's crazy. Okay, so here's sort of what I want to. Here's kind of how I want to get into this conversation. So, um, you know, we've been sort of quietly in the background with a lot of our client engagements, maybe for the last 5 years or so. We would build messaging playbooks for ourselves. A lot of times we didn't even share them with the client, because we're trying to get a beat on if we're going to come up with a campaign, or we're going to sort of recommend a content strategy, or sometimes, we even had a really big healthcare brand where they were trying to unify the messaging that they did externally with the messaging that they did internally, and tied back to what you do, hire the people that are going to be a big culture fit. And so we've been talking about that. And so we've been building these messaging playbooks. And then we started one time, I think we showed somebody like, oh, and we built this, and they're like, hey, that thing, we want to buy that thing to kind of drive all of our messaging. And so we've been really kind of doubling down, and this year extra focusing on the messaging playbook is the thing. This also ties to what you're doing in ChatGPT. We also believe that the challenge with ChatGPT obviously is that all of the answers kind of regress to the mean, right? And if you're going to use it, especially for content and messaging purposes, we believe you really have to give it the right inputs. It's garbage in, garbage out. You would never hire someone, and sit them down at a desk and say, start writing copy. You would probably train them a little bit in your company and your culture and your brand promise and your messaging pillars, et cetera, which is all the stuff that we do in messaging playbooks. And so what I wanted to get into, and Twitter might be a good segue, but I know that, we also talked about the USAA and Zappos kind of being at the other ends of the spectrum, is when you're recruiting, right? And I want to be clear so people really know what you do. You're the person that goes out, salesperson like, and says, we have a role to fill. I'm going to go find that perfect fit to fill this role, the same way a lot of marketers are looking for the ideal customer profile, right? So there's a lot of similarities between marketing and recruiting. But when you're doing that, how does the brand culture come into that? You probably don't have the, when you got handed a new CEO, you might not be thinking about that, but there was obviously a culture disconnect immediately right there. And I just love to hear kind of how you've seen that play out with different companies.
Yeah. So like you said, I'm on the front end. So sales development reps is very similar to what I do, what we call sourcing. And so we proactively go out and get talent, right? Because, and we can talk about this a little later, but at Zappos, I had them pull the data, and less than, I think it was 0.5% of the people that applied actually made it to on-site interview. And that is a lot of time wasted resources, right? So my job is to quickly figure out what's usually undocumented, which is culture, and then find a way to figure out, quantify it, and then go look for it on a LinkedIn profile or a blog. And then how to build the screening processes to eliminate some of that. Now, you would think this is very scientific. It's not. So that was the interesting thing. Right? Let's define our culture. Well, everyone has a mission statement or a culture statement. And what I'm trying to do by quantifying it, I needed a language. And so I used the personality insights of the Big Five, or the Oceans test, right? And they do a really good job of breaking down every, what they call facets of a personality, and even values. It is scientifically shown to measure values. I'm like, because I was Googling how to measure culture values, right? So once I could map values to the Oceans test, that gave me a starting point. And I've been trying to do this for years, but that at least that gives me a baseline, right? And then it's figuring out, decoding what the actual culture is, because what we say culture is the ideal, what we're working towards. Reality could be a mess, or there could be one department that's so different than the other department just because of the work that we do. Engineers tend to be more introverted. Salespeople seem to be more extroverted. And so I imagine culture is kind of a moving scale. In fact, at Zappos, there was this PhD that would walk around, and Tony Hsieh had cameras all over. They took over the old city hall in Vegas. So we had this big round circle where everyone could meet. And Tony was measuring in, he called collisions. He had read somewhere, and his theory was the more collisions, the more innovation would come up, right? So he actually blocked some of the exits to make different departments collide, right? So there had videos, almost like anyway, so they were just measuring these things, right? And I remember talking to the guy and the doctor, I'm like, I don't know much about this, but it would seem that every time someone left the company, that would impact the culture. Because it was a group thing, right? He's like, no, that's exactly right. We're trying to figure out how to do it. So they were spending a lot of money, a lot of resources. But the truth of the matter is, our San Francisco office was a lot different. They had a different hiring culture profile than accounting, and accounting had a different profile than our fashion department, right? So we talk about it like it's a solid thing. Zappos is big on this culture. USA is big on this culture, but really that's what they want to be, and it sounds good. In reality, it's just a mix on any given week, on any given day, but somewhere there's some norms, right? So then my job is to kind of match those.
So, I mean, I guess what I find interesting about that is on my side of the business, we are trying to excavate what that kind of core culture is. I wouldn't even say culture. We're trying to excavate what's the brand promise that exists in this company that is different enough than all of their competitors, and that there's actually a market for, so that there's a space there, an advantage that we can kind of hang our hat on. And then once we have that, then we start kind of building out what we call messaging architecture, which is basically like, okay, what are the things that we can say that support that master statement? And then what are all the things that start to fall beneath that, which might be use cases and case studies and proof points. And, you want to support all of these things. And so we do such a intentional and deliberate work to get that done. And I think what I'm hearing from you is that to varying degrees, does that actually get embedded back into the company so that it shows up when you're actually recruiting?
Correct. Right. I mean, there's, we on the recruiting side, we have the employee value prop. We borrow a lot of things from marketing and sales. So, or like a style guide, almost like a style guide framework, So at some places, marketing or someone would look over every job description, because it kind of blew me away at Zappos. I'm like, anyone can, Johnny the intern posts this live on a Zappos branded site, and no one's looking at this. And there's typos. And right now, if you go to job descriptions and you put Grammarly on it, you're going to find a mess. And it's just crazy that the fastest way to publish a site is to work in recruiting, because no one's looking at you, right? So, but companies that are more mature have a more mature model. It's like everything we do, everything you share on social should have a voice, should have the colors, should have the tone, right? But now whether that is true or not is different. That could be a different conversation. But I personally, when I'm consulting, I look for the ideal candidate persona. Basically, that who's the persona, what are the pain points? Because I hear on the ground, if I have a team, they're like, I don't want to use social, I don't know what to post. And posting transactional messages like, we're hiring. It's just, if you like, I'm a big fan of the inbound marketing approach, the different, it's like, well, you're already competing for these high dollar software engineers at the end of their cycle. We want to get them, earlier. Like, do you drive to work? Golly, 10 tips on how to, you want to look at their pain points and address them early. So we use a lot of the same things, or we try to use a lot of the same things that are done in marketing. And you would think as the recruiter, as a salesperson, to help close. So, I mean, there's two different conversations. Number one is identifying it, mimicking it, getting it out there, believing it, and it should bleed over into every email, every phone call. And then there's a reality of when you get hired, you're like, oh no, this is not real. We're just saying it, right? But anyway, so yeah, and we could. I'm just going to go ahead and address something you said because I'm about ChatGPT. I have a training product for recruiters, and the one thing I hear is like, no, because all the answers are the same, right? Like, I don't want to sound like everybody else. That's a big thing because we're the people that bother you on LinkedIn, right? We're sending thousands of messages on. We get your phone numbers, we get your emails with tools we have, and we blast you, right? So it's like, how can I increase my conversion rates? Well, tailor the message. But when you're doing that at scale, how do you do that, right? So as I started learning, I started taking prompt engineering courses and trying to figure it out. ChatGPT, they say it's like the smartest 3-year-old in the world. It just doesn't have context and it doesn't know what you want. So there are formulas you can use that says, number one, I guess the hardest part is you have to know what you want before you get to the terminal. I found myself on ChatGPT like, this sucks, or I don't know because I don't know what I want. It's not something you play with. I mean, you can. If you really want to get meaningful results, there's an exercise you have to go through. It's like, what is my real problem I'm trying to solve? Start from there. And then you got to have this conversation with ChatGPT. It's called prepping, or there's another word for it. But so basically you start off by warming it up. Hey, ChatGPT, do you know about inbound marketing? Yes or no? You got to tell it yes or no, because you don't want to use all your tokens because you're paying per word. So are you familiar with inbound marketing? Yes or no? Yes. Okay. And you can kind of get it talking, and then you put it in a role. ChatGPT act as an inbound marketing expert in the energy field, period. So now, out of the vast knowledge at ChatGPT, it starts to narrow it down because it uses a lot of computing power to figure out what the heck it is that you want. And then you tell it a task. I want you to turn my blog post into a inbound type marketing. Here's my persona. Here's the pain points. Or you can ask it, what are the pain points? Anyway, so you got to be real specific. And then you start getting really tight, concise answers. So I was in the middle of writing this book, and I have ADD and a little bit of dyslexia. So I've got these like 5 books that are in start mode, and it weighs on you like you're ashamed, and you talk about it like my wife's like, oh yeah, the book. Yeah, when's that coming out, right? And when I guess the second week, because I was not impressed with ChatGPT. I thought it was just going to be this AI or robotic. It's like this blinking cursor. I'm like, we're going backwards, right? And then I thought about reverse engineering. Those companies that do the book summaries? I'm like, well, those are good lead magnets. And that would be cool if I could share that with candidates. But I don't want to pay for this. And anyway, so I thought about it. So I shared one book summary from a paid subscription. And I wrote a prompt and said, let's reverse engineer this. Are you familiar with this book, Tipping Point? Yes. Okay. Now read that summary and tell me how they did it. And they would reverse engineer by looking at the summary and the book. So basically it gave you the 6 questions that would generate this for any book. And then I got real excited because now, and then you can tell it, are you familiar with this author? Yeah. Write this in that tone. Okay. And so then as I started working on my book, well, I don't want it to sound like anyone else. So then I started talking to ChatGPT and say, act as a linguistic expert and look at my tone, my vocabulary, my style. And I just got a transcript from all my YouTube videos. I put it in there and it's like, okay, we're done. What do you want to call it? We'll call it Larry, mimic Larry. And so now anything that I do, I'm like, make it like Larry. And so I really want to dispel the myth that it's all going to come out the same. It'll do exactly what you want it to do. You can combine 2 authors. But the best way to do it, and you and I talked about this, is just to talk like this call, or this video, transcribe it, and then there's some cool free tools that I could share. Like Harpa is a Chrome extension, and it's got a mimic feature. Like, what do you want to mimic? And you just highlight. That's me. Got it, right? And then you got to continue to train it. It's not an easy process, but once you figure it out, it's amazing. So when I sit there at night, like, what do I have to do? I got to get this book done. I think back like to the E-Myth book by Michael Gerber. Like, you can work in your business or you can work on your business. And so I tell myself, work on the prompt, not the output. Because if I can perfect the prompt, then I've got this magic that anything I point it to, it's still me. It's learning from me. And then I'll give it, like, put it in the attention, interest, AIDA method, or put it in the Harvard style. So all of a sudden, it's like having 3 assistants work for you. And so that, I mean, I just get, for someone like me who isn't the best writer, but I can talk about something and I'm knowledgeable, this has just been like life altering, you know?
Yeah. I
That's
mean,
my spiel, yeah.
I'm going to pick up on that because I think that, I mean, first of all, I'm kind of blown away by how many similarities there are between, you know, what you do in your recruiting world, right? So you got to, I'm going to break apart some of the layers right now for everybody kind of watching, listening, is that, you know, there's recruiter Larry, who is like a crazy experienced person at like going and figuring out, you need to fill this role. I know how to go and find, you know, good fit prospects to kind of fill this role. So there's that. Then there's you now have your business where you do this for other companies. So you're an entrepreneur, right? So there's like entrepreneur Larry sitting on top of recruiter Larry, right? You know, and then there's you actually doing your craft. You know, you actually going out and like saying, all right, I need to find these people. I need to figure out what my ideal candidate profile looks like.
Right.
We say ICP, ideal customer profile. You've got a different ICP, and I think what's kind of going off in my head right now is we've been having very similar conversations with our clients, right? So ChatGPT came out. I was the same as you. First of all, I had an existential crisis because I was like, oh shit, this thing can write.
Right.
Now, after you read a couple of things, you realize, oh man, it is like soup. It's like dribble. It skims the surface. A lot of people who get all excited in the beginning, just like ask it a stupid question, get a stupid answer, post it onto their social profile, and it's adding so much noise. I think to social and to the internet and all this other stuff. But after a while, I was like, okay, well, wait a minute. I have special knowledge about things. Like, I actually know how to craft messaging versus just kind of repeating something like a parrot. And so I think that your quote, which I'm totally going to steal, which is work on the prompt, not on the output, is brilliant. But kind of what I'm thinking about is that the stuff that you've done inside of your own world, kind of trying to create these good prompts, is that's just good marketing advice in general. I'm pausing now because you froze.
Okay, you were frozen and I was waiting for you, and then I froze. So
okay, yeah, I kept going just to make sure. We'll clean this up later. But what I wanted to comment on is I'm kind of fascinated by how similar the things that you do in your world, in your role, and as a business person in general are to what we need to do. And I think kind of what you're saying is really interesting because the way we think about a messaging, I mean, it used to be you had a messaging playbook and it was this static thing, right? That only people in the marketing department had. Sometimes we'd build battle cards for salespeople and they've got it. Or, you know, we used to call them a placemat. It's like, here's the key stuff that you need to know about our company. These are your pocket full of elevator speeches, right? But what's great now is, and you had to hope that your messengers kind of used it properly, right?
Right.
Now, what we're able to do is take this messaging playbook And that, it sounds a lot like some of the training you do in terms of when you're training a GPT. We're saying use your messaging playbook as your brain. This is
Right.
the brain. It knows what you stand for. It knows how you speak. It knows what you talk about, and more importantly, what you don't talk about, you know, and it knows how to support these things that you talk about. And you've also then taken, you know, a core set of documents and uploaded them to kind of further
Right.
inform it in terms of giving it your proprietary knowledge. And that sounds like it's very similar to what you're doing in terms of even being able to help other. I mean, you can expand it to anything, but I want to focus for a minute. You know, you've got a way, recruiting is difficult, but you've got a way to actually even help other recruiters be able to find good candidates. Is that right?
Right. I mean, I think of ChatGPT, of all the resources, because I'm a one person show, and all the things you wish you had: access to research, access to, you know, I've always had this insecurity about I don't have my persona right. I hope no one really. And so now that there's tools, I mean, now that ChatGPT opened up their GPT store, there's all kinds of persona builders, right? And then I've got tools. So in other words, it just allows me to do a lot more because um, whether it's recruiting, a blog, or a job description, you got to have SEO. You got to do A/B testing. No one does this. Okay. I've been preaching about this. I'm like, it's a landing page. A job description is a landing page. We need to A/B test it. But it comes out of this basement of HR. We've been using this job description for 10 years. You know, don't change, because there's legal ramifications to it, right? So yeah, there's this intersection of what to do and what not to do, but there's so much competition in the tech sector going after, let's say, African American software engineers. I mean, we're talking about a tiny pool, and we're all fighting for their attention. And so, the I'm sure this happens in marketing. No one has trained recruiters to. We get on LinkedIn and we say hi, right? When I was looking at breaking open the DISC personality and the Big Oceans test, is that recruiters tend to be extroverted, engineers tend to be introverted. We are just not talking the same language. So when you see ninja, be a ninja coder, this is an amazing opportunity. And then when you use software like Crystal knows, it's like introverts hate to hear, amazing, hate to hear, you know, and we're just, and no one's talking about it, no one's training. So that was an aha moment. Really understand your persona, but more importantly, understand yourself. Because we all think we know. I've been doing this for 25 years, I know. Well, do you? Are you testing it? Get 2 messages, A/B test it, right? So yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter what it is still marketing. You still need SEO, nursing job shortage. Where do I work for in nursing? Are you coming up? And then is it a transactional message? Is it just a job posting? You know, or is it a blog post? So yeah, I'm borrowing from marketing because there just really isn't anything there in recruiting.
That's
So yeah.
amazing. Yeah, I mean, I think that's yeah, the parallels are kind of crazy. I'm kind of curious also, you know, I think it's a massive insight that a job description is a landing page, right? And a job description is a representation of your company, how you talk, what you want, et cetera, et cetera. So when you're doing this and training other folks, I'm also curious, like I'm a little bit curious about the courting process, right? So, you know, we're big into storytelling. Our kind of, you know, not so secret sauce, but the thing that we do really well is build narratives for companies for different situations, right? So everything is a story, everything reverts back to story in some ways. And when you're recruiting, I imagine there's 2 things going on, right? There's 2 stories happening. One is the interviewer or the candidate sees themselves in a story, right? I know who I am. I'm trying to find a role here. If I get this role, it's going to fulfill this part of my imagination. Meanwhile, recruiter, right, is saying, I'm looking for this candidate, like I'm looking for this functional widget to plug into, and I know that's not how you think,
Right,
but
right, right,
some people think that way. Like
right.
I'm looking for this, I need to plug this hole with this body, and I need someone with this certain set of skills. So
By a
like
certain time.
exactly. So how do those two stories collide?
Well, it's disappointing. I get disheartened because when I do have these conversations, recruiters, I guess because it's usually someone's first job out of college, they're not coming with a lot of business domain experience. They don't even understand the org chart or how the company makes money a lot of the times. Okay, even at Twitter, I had these conversations like, do you know how we make, are we profitable? Like, no, it's grown so big. And with this separation of jobs, it's just like a Ford factory. All I do is I turn this bolt 3 times. I don't know what we make. And that's happened in the Bay Area with Facebook. And I only do this. And they even have a closer. The last person closes them. You got 4 people in the mix, right? So anyway, the point is that I don't think this is happening. I think star recruiters do this, but there is no incentive to share. Let's take, for instance, when I was at Microsoft, there was about 1,000 other people that did what I did, and we all had to make our numbers. They put us on teams, but we didn't really get points for sharing assists like in sports. So everyone's like, I remember they're like, shadow Johnny. Well, Johnny doesn't want me. I'm in competition. We're looking for the same people. So all this knowledge gets trapped, and there's no incentive to share it. And then they leave the company, and then all that knowledge is gone, right? Which is another good way for ChatGPT to keep all that knowledge in one place. But so yeah, there is no, you don't go into a recruiting place and they're just like, here's our narrative, here's our story. It's just the ones that are sharp and that they know, yeah, I've got to make my numbers. I've got to do it. So a lot of people don't do what I'm talking about.
So let me ask you let me ask the kind of elephant in the room question, right? So you're a star recruiter. You've worked for some of the biggest brands on the planet. What is your incentive to help other recruiters get better at recruiting?
It's a personality trait I have. Maybe I have daddy issues. I don't know. I want to please people. No, I love learning and I love sharing. Right. I guess at first I wanted to make my numbers, and then it becomes kind of empty. So there's like a bigger why. And so I just love helping people. Right. And so now the more I do it, I'm like, well, a lot of people don't want my help or they're not getting it. They're not there yet. Right. So it's just kind of a thing where no matter where I work, I do these weekly videos like on Loom or something. I'm like, hey, by the way, there's 30 Slack channel requests that they don't know how to do their expense report. Let me just show you how to do it because this should be done. It kind of like bothers me that there isn't some kind of standard operating process. And then as a team, we're being judged as winners and losers. And so I kind of want to get everybody up to speed. It's just kind of what gets me going.
All right, so just we're going to move on to another topic, but I
Okay.
want to make sure. So for all the recruiters out there, if you want to learn all of the secret skills of star recruiting,
Yes, go to
Larry.
go to training.RecruiterDNA or just find me on LinkedIn is the best place, Larry Hernandez, and I'll come up.
Awesome. Okay. I want to circle back to something we were talking about before we started recording, which is we started talking about companies with really strong cultures like USAA, and on the other side, let's say Zappos. And you said something about every company that has a strong culture also has a strong shadow culture. What did you mean by
Right.
that?
Well, it's just I just kind of had this aha moment recently, and it was like you see it on the news. You see these companies that are very successful. Let's pick a Wall Street company, and then there's embezzlement. You see these companies are successful, but there's all these like Uber got into trouble, toxic environments. And on the recruiting side, we don't talk about that. We just, we don't, it's not something we bring up unless we have to address it on a call. And because there's legal ramifications, but it just kind of hit me in the face the other day, like for every strength, we have the equal weakness. And the more powerful a company is, or I guess the more focused and tight their culture and brand statements are, that means there's an equally strong shadow, the evil side, the Superman with the cracks. No one's going to remember that. But it's like it's literally a shadow culture that lurks, and everyone has to have it. And doing some research, and just look at look at the personality profiles. Just think introvert, extrovert. If we're hiring all these values, each of those values has an opposite. So we've got some big blind spots. But when you bring it up, it's like, oh, but this is our culture. You don't want to be that person. Like at Zappos, it was, if someone accused you of not being a culture fit, that was like a big deal. And so you don't want to bring up things that might seem like, is Larry confused about our culture again? Like, you don't want to, these strong cultures, I mean, you got to be all in. Now, there are some individuals that weren't all in, and we know that they track them in HR on the matrix grid. No, but the ones that are super, super focused, just think about someone who has really strong beliefs about anything, right? And then you get 2 or 3 people that have that strong belief, you are kind of going into that cult world. So anyone that has the opposite opinion gets shunned out, right? But it's just real easy to see if you zoom out. At USAA, it's military, military, military. It's about honor. It's about tradition. It's conservative. And so they run real well, but they've got huge weaknesses with innovation, with self-starters. You get a bunch of, and I am generalizing, and there's some amazing people there. But if you raise this military, taking orders, standard operating procedure, you don't have a lot of out-of-the-box thinkers. And that leaves them open to the competition. Same thing at Zappos. We're zany, we're wow, we have DJs, and there was a guy that would walk around with just doing shots 9 a.m. in the morning, right? Well, we're probably not running as efficient as we need to be, and we've got some big holes as well. So I'm just fascinated, and hopefully I will kind of tease this out in a book. But basically, it's like for every strong culture brand, let's at least acknowledge the opposite side of the coin.
I love that. I love that. So what I would love to do is, I'm just trying this out, is where I'd love to ask you a question where I think you've got like special domain expertise and you could help me or you could help our audience. And on the same hand, if you've got any questions for me where I could, with my special expertise, help you, I'd love to do that. And so the thing that I was thinking, is with all of this kind of talk that we've been having about, when you're hiring, every hiring manager, I've been a hiring manager at very large corporations, and I've been the hiring manager and everything in between at my tiny corporation, right? And sometimes I have the personality where, like, I'm on a Zoom call, I'm looking for rapport, I'm a macro thinker, like, is there a light on the window? And does this person seem like they're interested and trainable? And then I hire, and I'm like, and it's usually my worst nightmare. It's like, oh my God, I have to spoon feed them every little task to do. They're just not self-starters. They're waiting for me to tell them something to do. Otherwise, they're happy to be sitting on the sidelines and not even letting me know that they have nothing to do. Like, I can't figure out, Larry, where the disconnect is. I don't know if it's that I talk too much and I see the best in them, and sometimes it just is not there.
Right. We tend to like people like ourselves, right? And so a recruiter, a seasoned recruiter, and I've had this talk with CEOs of small companies, it's the hardest to hire for because it means so much. It's your money. It's your company. When you get to big enterprises, it's kind of a numbers game, unfortunately. They still care, but it's not going to impact it if it's there's 2 people and you hire a third. But you've got to separate that. You got to have that hard talk with, like, you're this is what got you there. What do you need? And it's probably going to not be the best interview. Hopefully they can, as a recruiter, I would coach the candidate and I would coach you. So it's like matchmaking. You don't want 2 Larrys together, right? Nothing will get done. It's all ideas. And so you get these 2, maybe opposites, but 2 characteristics. So you've got to prepare the hiring manager, and say, look, And sometimes I'll throw in kind of like real estate. I'll show them the bad house first. I'll get a candidate in there, maybe even an internal candidate that's low risk, but the manager, they're not professional recruiters or hires, right? So you got to get them warmed up, give them the interview guide, and coach them to say, look, this is not going to be perfect, right? Like just like matchmaking, there isn't going to be the perfect person out there. Let's categorize and prioritize what top three. You wanted to be a CPA, right there. That puts us into a different world. Not the stereotype, but this is a auditing. It's a focused, more introverted group, right? So they might not get along with sales, and that's okay. But you got to kind of have that talk because, like I said, if they're getting along with you and you're just great, that's probably like going to be a good friend or a partner or a role, but probably not going to be what you need. Mm-hmm. And so that's what the good recruiter would do is you just create a scorecard and say, let's try them temp, let's try them contract. But you've also got to, this is your company. You got to kind of take a break on them. And if those things, like if you said, look, they're not self-starters, this and this and this, we'll address that early in the process. Right. And it's not perfect. Someone will get through because they want, you're trying to, it's like dating. You say the things that you know that they want to hear. But you can kind of tease out those things that you need. Stay focused on what you need. It might be a little uncomfortable or might not be your best friend, but that's kind of how it goes.
So when folks are building, and I love the idea of the ideal candidate profile. It's so similar to an ICP in marketing. So would would you say that building that ideal candidate profile is fundamental? And then when you're thinking about that, what are the 2 to 3 non-obvious things that somebody should maybe build into teasing out in an ideal candidate profile?
Yeah, good question. The hardest part is that the ideal, who's ideal, right? Is it the VP's ideal, the company's? Ideally, they'd all be the same, but they're not. They never are because everyone sees it through a different lens. So a self-starter to high up is great, but then it might challenge authority on a smaller team. So you've got to have these conversations. If you're not having a good hour conversation with the recruiter before you start the process, it's going to go bad, almost guaranteed, because people don't really know what they need. Okay, someone left, and are you looking for someone to fill their shoes, or are you looking for someone to make your team a better team? What is it that we're looking for, right? So I can perceive what the ideal persona is, and that really helps me, like you said, because I'm out here. I might have a 1% response rate, 2-3% response rate on LinkedIn. So I've got to get that messaging tight. And the way we do that is by really pushing like you were talking about, what makes us at least different enough to get you on the phone. I'm just trying to get them on the phone and see if they're probably qualified because I've checked them out on, technically they're probably pretty close. And that's just from years of experience, right? So now I'm looking for those personality, soft skills. And then I'm looking for, like, let's say examples, I was looking for ego. So if you have an experienced interviewer, you can kind of tell me about some of the things you've done. And there's some questions, you could just ask ChatGPT for a list of behavioral questions that address certain personality types, right? And then you need a lot of practice. So I guess the main thing is, just like we were talking about when I was talking about my personality is different than my ideal candidate personas, understand that the world is not you. Okay. And so you've got to be prepared for that. I guess as far as some of the quick wins, because I have to do this at scale. It's that triangle. How much can you afford? How fast do you need the person? And what's the quality? I can give you 2, can't give you 3. Larry, we want, when I work for a company, let's just say it doesn't have a big brand. Larry, I want some of the engineers like Google. I want that was the gold standard for so long. And it's like, how do I break it to this person at this tobacco company or like at this, gas nozzle fuselage company? They're not going to get anyone at that level. And they probably don't even need them. And they would both be miserable with that person. You got to have that talk and kind of have the expectations of it, right? And plus, you can't afford them. All right, so let's talk about that now. So what I do is I like to get them on LinkedIn and on the big edition. And as I'm talking to them, I get the requirements down and further. So you want them in Ohio, can't do remote. Nope, got to be here in Cleveland, right? They need to be a CPA. Yep, zip. And all of a sudden we've got a nice tight pool of hopefully less than 200. And then how many of them are looking? Go back to the inbound marketing. How many of them are right there? Because you said you have 2 weeks, right? They got to give their 2 week notice. We're going to do a drug test. And all of a sudden, oh my gosh, reality sucks. It's like, this ain't going to happen the way I thought it was going to happen. But if you don't have it now, that conversation now, because we only get paid on the outside, like headhunters, I only get paid if it's a successful hire. So I've seen it all go wrong. You do this enough with my personality. I can hear it, right? You start to hear the silences, like, oh boy, this person's going to back out, or, so, I mean, it's a tough question you ask, but really getting to the core requirements. When you go buy a new car, we get excited to see that car, but really, what do you need? Do I need 4-wheel drive all the time, or is it something I want? Right. So you got to just separate those and get to the reality check as fast as you can.
Yeah, when you were talking about that, it kind of reminded me. I'm reading, Poor Charlie's Almanac about Charlie Munger, and one of his things that I think it's so interesting, and it's sort of my theme for 2024 anyway. It is inverse thinking, and thinking like, what do you not want, right? And so when you were saying it has to be this, and it has to be this, and you get tighter and tighter, it sounds like a lot of kind of finding that right candidate. And again, it's the exact same in marketing. It is really figuring out, like, how much can you eliminate, because you go from a really big universe. My worst thing is when I'm like, who's your target market? And there still are those people that say everyone is, we're like water, like, whoa, impossible to target everyone. Like, it's not, you don't have the money unless you have all the money. There's no way for you to target that. And so a lot of it is trying to figure out, okay, what's outside of the lines, as much as you're trying to figure out what's inside the lines.
Right. You're trying to negotiate, on a job description. As a recruiter, a pet peeve of all recruiters is, you post this job. This is an interesting story. You post a job, let's say it's Zappos, and you'll get thousands and thousands and thousands of applicants. Now, me, or you look at, like, a relative or a friend, when they apply, it's a big deal because you ask all these darn questions. But like you said, we're trying to filter out. A recruiter cannot hire you, but they can say no. Can't say yes, but they can say no. So you're just trying to weave your way in just to have that conversation. If you can get to the hiring manager, that's a win, kind of like a funnel, right? So you open up a job, and there's always a lack of resources, and there's too much unqualified leads coming at you, and it just overblows the system. So now you got meetings, you got this, you got a happy birthday deal, and you look and you've got 50 open jobs, all of them that have 3,000 applicants, and they're just coming in. So it's like, right? And it happens everywhere. So I had this aha moment at Zappos. I was talking to a vendor, and something clicked. I went home and I thought about this. I'm like, what if, because my job was, I want my people to source. I want them to proactively go out and get the best talent. But they were too busy replying to all the bad leads, right? They couldn't separate the good from the bad. So they were just dealing with everybody. Hiring teams were getting mad because we're just too slow, right? So they wanted to use outside agencies, which is like, oh, it hurts, right? Because that's what we do for a living. So I'm like, what if we just didn't post jobs? And it was like, wait a minute. And that's when I had the idea to go have the admins pull all the data at each stage, this huge spreadsheet. Now, just looking at the tech, our tech part of Zappos, and it's like only 0.5% of the people that apply get to the on-site. I mean, we're flying these people in for 2 or 3 days, hotels. We get our head of engineering out because we want to get experience. So, I mean, you do this 13, 14 times. you're impacting all, just the resources used on the wrong person is not scalable, right? So I thought, well, the math is there to where it's not really going to impact us. It's going to shock the system, but it's not going to impact us. So I wrote this fake press release to my boss, and because he always liked to be first at things, at Zappos, you want to be first. So I wrote this fake press release and was like, first thing in the morning, I'm like, check this out. There's this company. The only company that ever do this, they didn't post jobs. And I just did it. And he was like, who's the company? I'm like, wait. And this manager, he did this and it changed who's it? I'm like, company Zappos, and the manager's you. And he's like, and he ran into legal, which, like I said, every time you apply, you're opening yourself up to risk. And all they heard was less risk. So they're like, do it. But at the end of the day, he got all the approvals. And we went on a road show. And they made the Wall Street Journal. It was this amazing thing. Zappos stops posting jobs. And the message is, and it eventually didn't work. It wasn't implemented correctly. Because you've got what we call order takers or customer service type individuals. And they weren't used to going out and hunting. So we kind of had the wrong team, right? They were like, no one's applied. Like, no, you have to go out there. And I kind of stressed them out because we had the wrong profile at the job. But what an amazing deal. I tell leaders, if you ever want to slow down somebody, have them post a job. Because that's just going to gum up the whole works. It's like opening up, what is it, like Black Friday? Just imagine the doors opening. People from all over the world apply. It's like, All right, so just don't post it. Give your team 3 weeks and have them proactively test out that persona to make sure it's right. And then you can kind of reverse engineer it from there. But it's fascinating. It's a fascinating case study.
That's fascinating. Yeah. I mean, it kind of reminds me of, what we're seeing with our clients and a lot of the advice that we're giving, this year and since ChatGPT, honestly, it is that, the old fashioned way of trying to, create forms and do lead magnets and market like crazy where you're trying to get leads and then because your sales department wants leads and then they're going to follow up on the leads and you're talking like MQLs and SQLs and all this stuff is like, and I think that like it hasn't actually been working for a while unless you have like a highly transactional business and you've got a funnel where the stages are very clear. It's not a complex purchase, right? Most of the folks that we deal with are B2B. It's a very complex purchase. It's high ticket. There's a lot of stakeholders involved in the decision. And it's, we're doing sort of a similar thing on the marketing side where what we're recommending is like, don't just try to get people to come to your landing page and fill out a form because you're going to have a bunch of form fills. Then you're going to like be dripping everybody. And then like everyone's going to get those drips. But like the reality is that like on a good day, 1% of the people that you drip to are ever gonna like make it further down funnel. They mostly just wanted your thing, and they're probably not even opening your thing anyway, which is crazy how people fill out forms for stuff that then they don't actually care about the thing that they filled out. So I think that's a very similar thing. Kind of what I'm talking about is demand generation versus lead generation. Like create the demand, make somebody want to come work for you, and make the people who know. I want you, I'm a good fit for you. Like, I want to be in business with you, like make them come is sort of similar to, I think what you're talking about. So let me turn the tables.
Okay.
If I could help you or the folks that you talk to in any way, what's something that I could.
Yeah. So like, I'm trying to get this book out, right? I'm calling it a playbook. Basically, it's for recruiters who want to learn how to recruit machine learning engineers. AI is hot right now. Been a lot of layoffs in recruiting. Thousands of recruiters are out of work. So I figure, let me share this knowledge. And so, I've just over-engineered it a little bit. Now it's become this monster. It's like Wikipedia now because there's a notion and it's got a glossary. But I guess, I work hard on doing these things, like my training, and then it's crickets. I'm like, oh, let me SEO optimize it. I do that. I'm like, no. And it's just like, I feel like I failed. Like okay, well, I guess the market isn't hot. And then I usually bail on it like on 8 months. And then, like, a year later, someone will fill out the form and like, hey, maybe I gave up. And I guess it's like, I don't have the money to just put into a lot of ads, right? Maybe I'll do retargeting. Well, you got to have people to retarget, right? And so I'm just like, maybe I got the persona wrong. Maybe I suck, right? So it's like, what do you do? You've got this thing that you hopefully is good. They're like, what do you do?
That's a great question. I love it. And you and I are like birds of a feather. We start a lot of things. We get really excited about things. And we see this with our clients too. So here's my advice of what to do when you're starting off an initiative. You have a ton of emotional energy at the beginning of something, right? You are fired up. You're like staying up late at night. You've got like your big massive outline, and then you realize, oh, I forgot to include this. You're like, let me go kind of peg that into my outline. And this is the same in any market. Trying to get your book out is very similar to doing anything marketing. So here's my I don't know if it's controversial. It shouldn't be controversial, but here's my 2 cents about that. One of the things that we see is, and I know that you're good at this, is don't wait until the book is finished to start sharing the book. I mean, I'm actually starting a brand new book right now. I'm going to publish the very first chapter in a LinkedIn article, and I'm going to publish all my drafts there, because what we're seeing with a lot of companies is the content actually needs to move to the feed. People don't want the big gigantic thing. Some will, but you have an opportunity across the entire journey to share what you're doing. So what I'm trying to do is, like, as I'm kind of building out my chapters, I'm just taking it and plugging it into a LinkedIn post or plugging it into a LinkedIn article or sharing it via my newsletter, but kind of doing, sharing along the way. So share the journey. Don't wait until, I always tell people, go for direction, not perfection, because if you wait for perfection, you're never going to share it. And it's all going to be wasted, because you've got real, real good stuff that you can be sharing with people. The other thing is this. Let's talk about the 8-month lag, right? You're doing it. You're diligent. You're doing all of the right things, but you are not getting the feedback loop that tells you it's worth the squeeze. My 2 cents on this is, if you did your homework in the beginning, if you figured out that there were unmet needs, that there is a gap for, and that you can fill a real and legitimate need, and you have done, even the cursory amount of making sure what you perceive as an unmet need is not, in fact, an already met need, which, folks, by the way, is as easy as shopping for the thing that you're making on Google. Just see if it exists and see if they do a good job at it. It's very, very simple. I would say what I'm kind of preaching to everybody is persistency over consistency. Because if you keep going, right, all of the other people that you think got there first, or that are doing it better, et cetera, those people will fade away at some point. The people that succeed, and the companies that succeed, and the new ideas that succeed, very often, again, if you've done your homework in the beginning, are just the ones that keep going. They outlast, right? So I think it's an outlast game. I also think that, like, if you continue to share, the audience you really care about is going to find you. You need to do some fundamental work of making sure that you're on task, right? So the number one is persistency. Number two is guardrails. I can tell you my mission 2024 is own the term messaging playbook. We build actionable messaging playbooks. Actionable messaging playbooks is the thing that you're going to hear out of my mouth, all of 2024. And I need to, since I have vast interests, I need to try not to be like, and this also, and also this. Oh, by the way, I'm also interested in this, because you confuse the people that are coming to you like, ooh, when I want to know about a messaging playbook, I'm going to come to Ginger. I throw something else out there, and they're all of a sudden confused. Like, is that the thing? And by the way, which is why we think messaging playbooks are so important, is because it gives you a framework of being able to own your message that is scalable, right? You have to be able to talk about one thing, but there are unlimited ways that you can talk about that thing. But what's going to be most dangerous is then bringing in something else 6 months, 8 months, 10 months later, just because you were impatient. And so
Right.
I would say be patient, persist, and stay within the guardrails of what you really want to get traction on.
Awesome. Now you said something. I want a clarification. So, like when I do research on a new project, I've heard from like the Amazon, the big Amazon affiliates, like if it's not out there, don't sell it because there's not a really proven demand. And then I've heard, well, be the first. So I guess in other words, if I have an idea of a book and there's 3 of them out there, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I mean, it could be a good thing and a bad thing. I think it's a good thing in that there's a market for it. And a lot of it is timing, right? I mean, the thing about books, which I think is so amazing is, the same book has been sold like 1,000 different times, called different things. When you talk about like how to do a marketing plan, if stories that stick, I can tell you like at least 80% of the books on my shelf are the same exact book, only they were written at a different time with a different voice by a different author, and they were the hot thing at that moment. So when it comes to books in general, what's great about books, and if anyone who's like a book nerd like I am, like if I want to learn something technical, right, something of the now, I look at the copyright date. I don't want the one that's 5 years ago. I want the one that's like now, because it's going to be up to date. And so I think it's a good thing if your category exists, and if there are other books in that frame. It also means that there is a market for it and there is a target for it. People have already opened up their wallets and spent money on this thing, so it's possible. At the same time, I think that there's always going to be things that you have a different slant on, you have a different take on. And here's my most important thing that I didn't mention before, which is have a freaking point of view. They may have written it, in some certain way or some sort of like, non-partial way, but these days, and especially with ChatGPT, where anyone can write a bunch of drivel, they can have, because they're not actually writing it, they're just having ChatGPT do it, is if you have a very strong point of view about something, which you do when you're talking about recruiting, which is like, understanding who you are and who they are. I mean, that's a revelation to me, right? Like, so having a strong point of view about something and expressing that, I think, is also good. So that's how you can kind of, it's new, but it's
Right.
not new.
That's awesome. Very cool.
Awesome. What have we, is there anything else that we have left to talk about?
I want to share one story with you. Back to Zappos. I had read this article, and it's out there, that someone at Starbucks, a consultant Starbucks, said, people apply to Starbucks and only X% get in. But that's still being told no by Starbucks. In other words, you don't have a separate brand. And we talked about this before. A lot of big companies, for a while there, that was a big deal. Employee branding, right? So right before South by Southwest, while I was at Zappos, I told my manager, only 1% or less. And Tony Hsieh used to brag about this. It's harder to get into Zappos and Harvard. But if you say no to my mom or someone I care about, that sucks. Zappos sucks. So on one end, we're saying we care about you. And the other one, we're just declining and not hiring them. And so it was then we mentioned that, and he had talked to the head of customer service, and they ran a report. It was later, after some drinks, he told me that 1 out of every 4 applicants had a Zappos account. And then they were like, "Uh-oh, what do we do?" Now, I don't think it ever got solved, but just for branding and for marketers, it's like, I don't care if it's a brick and mortar store, online store, customer service, returns, or applying to a job. Bad experience is a bad experience, and we it's a big deal. Candidate experience. We talk a lot about it. You may find one person that cares about it at a company, but it's about numbers. We got to get these things hired. So that's just something to keep in mind. Or I thought it was fascinating that, you got lead generation blasting out emails. And I've seen this, and I've talked to people about this, like, have a different domain name because you're going to hurt your domain score right? Because the email providers are looking at, is this spam or not, right? It's algorithms. And if a bunch of people are tired of getting spammed by your junior recruiter because they're sending out too many emails and they're not on your persona, then it starts hurting your domain score, right? So there's so many little things that let's get a job site, right? It can help you, it can hurt you. So before you post a job, just know you're going to get a lot of people in. It's probably the only thing. And I've thought about this. Like, I can post a job right now. No one could have ever heard of me. I'm going to get hundreds of inbound leads. Now I'm over here. The entrepreneur in me is like, wow, everything else I try to do, no one, you're getting like 1, 2, 3, 4%. But if you post a job, it's nuts. How can I convert that? That's a different story, but that's just something to kind of think about, that the people, they share the same accounts. So
I think that's fascinating. That actually gets my wheels turning too. It's like, oh, that is fascinating. Yeah, you can't get anyone to fill out your form when you're trying to sell them something. But if you're like, hey, come work for me.
They'll spend 45 minutes on these stupid questions, like upload your resume. Yeah. Now answer everything that you just uploaded, and they do it. Right. And there's ethical reasons, and multi-level marketing and other places have done this. They get on Indeed and then they get kicked off eventually. Right. Because it's kind of like, that's not cool. It wasn't really a job. Anyway, it is fascinating that there's got to be some way to do that. It's like they're coming to us. Right. At the same time, you have another person that can't get enough people. And the databases, now with all the rules, I was always curious, like, these people are interested in Zappos. Shouldn't we sell them shoes too? And the people selling shoes, should recruiting even be in HR? It's kind of a sales marketing role. So anyway, those are just things that come up every once in a while.
That's fascinating. I mean, by the way, my takeaway after talking to you is that, like, damn, there is a lot more to hiring than I even realized, especially if you're hiring at scale. And the candidate experience you talked about is also, I think it is really an important point, right? Because it is part of your brand. And especially if you're a large brand and you're trying, people want to be a part of your culture. They want to, hopefully they're applying for all the right reasons. And they actually want to be kind of like a meaningful part of your team. Right. And when you say no to them, they feel a certain way, right? And I think that there are things that even, HR might be able to take from the marketing side of things, where, we get people that sometimes that want to work with us that in reality, they're just not at the level of folks that we work with. At the same time, what we try to do is say, listen, we're probably not right for you, but here's 3 or 4 more other companies that might be a really good fit for you, where you're going to get a much more meaningful experience than you would with us. So that's great.
Yeah. Cool.
All right. Well, if you need all of the expertise that Larry has when it comes to recruiting, being a better recruiter, and companies who want to understand, like, how to really hire for culture and make sure you're doing it right and make sure your people are delivering on a candidate experience, contact Larry. You can either search like Larry Hernandez Recruiter on LinkedIn, or go to
just RecruiterDNA.com.
RecruiterDNA.com. Awesome. And if you're convinced you need a messaging playbook, everybody knows how to reach me. Thanks, Larry. Really appreciate this conversation.
Thank you. Thanks, Ginger.